Good afternoon. It's so nice to see so many of you here right now. Thank you for letting us know where you're joining from, and we will be starting in just a moment. Good afternoon. We have a lot of people here today, and we are ready to get started. Thank you. And today and this afternoon, we're going to be welcoming Carol Jago. But before we have her start, I'm going to do a few announcements. Can we option to mute, unmute? It's been so long since I've been Zoom. Can I assume yes, you are automatically muted, Jessica. Next slide, please, Kia. Okay, this is our slide, and I want to welcome you to the ERWC webinar series. And this is our slide on different ways that you can stay connected with us and join us for different things. So in the recording, you'll be able to see different ways that you can follow us on social media. Next slide. And our hashtag is hashtag ERWC or expository reading and writing. And we are on X, Facebook, and Instagram. Next slide. We have our ERW workshops are up on our online community, and we will be putting new workshops up for next year, so stay tuned. We have some exciting things coming up next year, and we are looking forward to seeing you at our workshops next year. Next slide. These are the webinar series that we've had, and you can visit our webinar page if you want to see past recordings. And this webinar will also be posted up there when we have completed Carol's webinar. Next slide. We have our conference coming up on June 25th in Southern California and June 17th in Northern California. And Trevor is going to be our speaker, and we hope you can join us. The registration is in our online community on the front page, and you will be able to register for the conference. It's free this year for individuals to come and join either in Northern or Southern California. Next slide. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Deborah Robinson, who will be introducing Carol Jago for us.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. I'm looking at the numbers in the chat or as participants are coming in, and we've had an incredible turnout for this webinar. So I know that you are all as excited as I am. And today's presenter doesn't really need an introduction. Carol has been a fixture in California English language arts education for over 40 years, first as a middle and a high school English teacher, then while wearing a number of different hats from education columnist for the LA Times to president-elect of the National Council of Teachers of English and as the current editor of California English. And it is my honor to serve with her on the ERWC Steering Committee, where her contributions and support have been instrumental in the development and success of the ERWC curriculum. So as you are all here, please welcome Carol Jago back to the ERWC webinar series. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I'm so happy to be here and so appreciative of all of your time after a full work day to come and to help us together think through what is going on when students completely balk at doing any homework reading. Uh, why are so many of our students having such difficulty staying with a text for more than a few moments? Uh, I wish I had a magic bullet. I promise I would furnish it to you in a second. But I'd like to set a context and help us think through together what's possibly going on. And the first thing I'd like to say is some of you may be new teachers. And I'm sure there are many days when you say to yourself, oh, if only I'd taught in the good old days. And I just want to testify here and say there have never been any good old days when all 36 kids in the classroom all did their homework reading and showed up with a book and a pen or or whatever they needed to bring to class and were ready to go. And I say that because I think there are some things that are different right now in today's classrooms. As I travel around the country, one of the things that motivated me to write this book, the book in question, Why and How Reading is in Crisis, is that there is data that students are reading less than any previous generation, and they enjoy reading less. Okay, it's self-reported data, but even so, this is important for us to think about because we get good at the things we enjoy. I'm no good at roller skating because I don't enjoy it, I don't do it. We get good at and we practice the things that bring us pleasure, whether it's a physical activity or something like reading. Uh, and right now, it seems that books are losing the attention war for kids. Look at these the slope of these lines. How that red line, students who never or hardly ever read for pleasure, used to be 8%. Now it's a third of the students. And conversely, it used to be 35% of students said they read almost every day, and now it's down to 14%. How could this not play out in terms of NAEP scores? Now, I have to be careful here because I sat on the National Assessment Governing Board, and so I can really get into the weeds, and I don't want to do that because you've all seen the reports that uh, it is very discouraging that the results of reading comprehension for our 4th, 8th, and 12th grade. So just so you understand what the National Assessment for Educational Progress does, it's often called the nation's report card. And it measures by law every 2 years students in 4th, 8th, and 12th grade in reading and math. It also assesses in other content areas, but on a different schedule. And what you might, and so the reading scores were very discouraging. The only good news for all of us as language arts teachers, math was worse. So if there's some solace to be taken, what you might not know about this assessment is that along with the reading comprehension portion of it, we also asked students to take a survey about their habits, and 42% of lower performing students report that they rarely read for pleasure. So let's again unpack this. The very students who are performing at the lowest level, who are having some of them just difficulty with the most basic things that we would call reading comprehension, aren't reading. Well, how on earth will students ever get better at this if they're not doing it. And it can be kind of chicken and egg. And let's all of us hope that we can get teaching early reading to be the best possible program that we can. A program, curriculum, instruction, the teachers are better prepared. But even if we get that down perfectly, the problem won't be solved, because reading is a lifelong pursuit. And unless the little ones who learn how to read don't develop those muscles for reading, don't become actually avid readers, children who choose to pick up a book, we're never actually going to be able to assign enough reading that students need to do. We need to create a community of readers. We need to create a culture of reading. And this within a culture, a society that is often anti-intellectual. So this is really hard work. I mean, teaching has always been hard work, but I do think it's gotten harder. And it's having an effect on students' mental health. I mean, when the Surgeon General puts out an advisory about the harmful impact of social media, and how it's making students feel worse about themselves and question their friendships and admit that they themselves can't get off it, that there's an addictive aspect to it. I know that, like, in a way, the easiest thing to turn to is, well, the problem is social media. That's what's changed. Kids today, all they want to do is look on their phones, and so that's the problem. I think we need to dig deeper as educators and think about how we can help students take control. We are never going to be able to pull these phones out of their hands. The technology is just going to keep getting better and better. But we have reached a point where we need to help students have more agency over their own use. So the Common Sense Census has been surveying students, and this is a group I really respect. Jean Twenge, all the researchers in media use by young people rely on this survey. They do it every 2 years. Their sample size is just what is large. They touch all the bases in terms of socioeconomics, ethnicity. And what they found is that the smartphone is a constant companion. More than 4 hours of teen smartphone use on an average day. So again, I want you to put that number right next to the fact that you'd like to assign 20 pages of homework reading, and kids said, no way, I don't have time. I have soccer practice, I have this or that, or all the things, I have math homework. By the way, why is it that students always do their reading homework for English last? Math first, and then it's 10 o'clock at night, and they pick up the book or the screen where they're reading, and they turn on the music and they start. That's when they do their reading. We need, so here's just a little really practical thing. Tell your students, I want 1 day a week and not Friday. I want 1 day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, where you do the homework reading first for English. The other thing that this constant companion survey found, and again, this is recent, it's the 2023 results, that phone use during school hours is nearly universal, but it does vary widely. So we've been seeing more and more high schools trying to ban cell phone use. This is the part that is impinging upon reading, though, that they're getting up to 237 or more notices or text messages a day. So let's picture what happens. Good student doing her reading, picks up the book, starts reading, and within 2 minutes, she gets a text message. No teenager in the world isn't going to turn around, look at that phone. But by the time she goes back to the book, she's lost the thread. She has to start that sentence, that paragraph over. So one, it works against, if it's a novel, if it's fiction, that immersion that makes one, that supports comprehension and keeps one going, builds that stamina for reading on because you're motivated, you're there with the character, you want to know what happens next. Or for an argumentative text, for an essay you're reading, you lose the thread of the argument. And so our students are interrupting themselves. What if, again, this isn't something we can mandate, but what if we ask students to consider tonight when you do your homework reading, you don't need to turn your phone off, but what if you put it in the other room and see if it goes better? See if it's easy, if you find the reading easier, see if you retain more of it. The other things that this survey found is that TikTok is irresistible. I will testify to that myself. And over half of the teens use their phones overnight. So what do we find? This is a book that's on the New York Times bestseller list right now. It's gotten a lot of attention in all kinds of forums, that anxious generation. Now, I will say this author is a digital absolutist. He thinks there should be, kids shouldn't get their phones before high school. There should be no phones in school at all. I don't think it's possible. I'm just a pragmatist. I think the ship has already sailed, but I do believe that he has things to say in this book. I was surprised. I went into it thinking, you know, what we really need to do is to help students to be responsible users of social media, of the internet. But there are a lot of other things he talks about that I learned from. And he talks about 4 foundational harms: social deprivation, what the Surgeon General found in terms of friendships and relationships and face-to-face connections; sleep deprivation, which the Common Sense census identified as what students are being awakened by alerts all night long. And the issue that is the issue of this webinar about students who don't have the stamina to stay with a text is attention fragmentation. That students are not developing that ability to concentrate. They are becoming and I don't think it's just students. I think all of us have experienced this, particularly during the pandemic. I found it very difficult to stay with a novel. I also find that this is a habit. You know, we used to talk a lot about habits of mind. That the habit of mind of simply saying, this is what I'm doing right now. I am reading this book and I'm going to do everything I can to focus my attention right here. At which point students who get into the habit of that, instead of being addicted to the fast-moving world of social media, they can, I mean, in a good way, become addicted to reading, to stories. And then I think a lot of the issues that we're experiencing can begin to be less prominent. I don't know about you, but I love research that supports what I already believe. I know it's confirmation bias, but when I saw this study from Psychology Today that said teens who read more report having better mental health. And I think there are just so many things that we've talked about in so many circumstances. The California Reading and Literature Project for years about how what opening up your world the way reading does helps you see that you're not alone. You're not the first person that's ever felt this way. You're not the only one who worries about how you look and how, oh, you said something, wasn't that stupid? How can I take it back? That reading really serves an enormous is of enormous help, a balm to our souls. And that's what breaks my heart when students tell us they hate reading. Well, first of all, I taught 10th grade for 28 years. And so I've learned to hear through some of the things that kids say. And so when they hate reading, I think what they really hate is being confused, intimidated, embarrassed, or even shamed by a book, which we don't mean to do, but very often the things we do in school, what is the motif? Even what is the main idea? Like the questions that have right and wrong answers actually make students feel stupid. And so instead of like quizzing kids hard like that, what if we invited them to bring their questions about a book to class? Now, the other thing that I worry about that we like, because we have to look at our own pedagogy and say, what could we be doing differently? Like we can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. I love this cartoon of this little girl saying, I paraphrased, summarized, outlined, compared, contrasted, inferred. Can I just read now? And now I thought reading strategies were just going to solve all my problems as a teacher, because doesn't it make sense? Let's help struggling readers learn how to do what good readers, proficient readers, extraordinary readers do instinctively. Well, if it had been that easy, we wouldn't be where we are today, because strategy, instruction, those ideas have been around for a long time. So what happened? Too much practice with strategies and not enough reading. We forgot that piece where we actually need students to be turning the pages, or again, whatever device, whatever format they're absorbing text, to be doing it. And we have proof. We have Daniel Willingham is a wonderful cognitive scientist, and he says it's well worth the time to teach students comprehension strategies, but 5 hours of instruction yields the same advantage as 20 hours. And so we need to teach students how to do this, and then quickly say, now apply it every day. Maybe just little reminders instead of more and fancier strategy instruction. Think about this. The goal isn't a perfectly filled in graphic organizer. The goal is the organized thinking that graphic organizer is meant to represent. And so we need to make sure that our students are actually doing what we're teaching them how to do with texts that are worthy of that work. I know in the early years of my teaching, I spent an awful lot of time always looking for books that were shorter, easier, and funnier. And you know, that was a dead end because the kids still told me they were boring. They still hated it. So I said, fine, we're going back to Beowulf. At least somebody's going to be happy here, and that would be me. No, no, this is absolutely true. Today, I got an email message from a former student who is now a sixth grade teacher who was thanking me for Beowulf and saying that she was teaching a simplified version to her sixth graders. Oh my gosh, that made me so happy. let's take a minute and what I'd love us to do is just in the chat, just how do you observe your students' reading habits and stamina for reading changing? And then how is this affecting curriculum, instruction, issues of practice? Just take a minute in the chat. What are you thinking? So many great ideas here. So many great observations. I hope you have a chance to just look at this chat because this is an amazing group of teachers here. Couple of things that came up about audiobooks and reading aloud to students. There is tremendous value in reading aloud to students, and it builds a love of reading. There's the oral nature of it, but it's also important for us to realize that you're doing the reading, not students. So while reading to students is building that appreciation of what literature can do, it's not necessarily making them a better reader. And the same is true of audiobooks. Now, there's a tremendous value in audiobooks for students who actually have difficulty with decoding the book, with the text, because it allows them to participate in class discussion and to be intellectually growing, even though the text is too hard for them. But again, unless they're following along and parsing the language at the same time as they're listening, again, it's that in and of itself isn't going to make them a better reader. Now, background knowledge came up. So I want to be real clear. Audiobooks are fantastic in all kinds of ways. We have all this downtime that in a car, on kids who have long bus rides. Listening to an audiobook is building that story, they're building background knowledge. Every book, in some way or the other, is teaching you more about the world around you. So, as with so many things in education, it's not either or, it's and in both. And if we can help our students see that there is value here. Another comment was about students being drawn to graphic novels and graphic nonfiction. Again, we are living in an extraordinary time when graphic novels are not just comic books anymore. Some of them are. I mean, the idea of turning every single classic into a graphic novel, some of them are pretty bad. I mean, they're just comic book versions. But there are true works of art. Many books that are winning all kinds of awards are graphic works. And so, again, we need to work with colleagues to distinguish those that have huge potential for capturing students and making them readers. Also, I think we, as educators, probably need to do some work in this area. I know I did. I just read words on the page. I don't really look at the pictures. That is a terrible way to read a graphic novel. And so I had to change my habits. And see, I think telling students things like that about yourself as a reader can help them have a consciousness about who they are as a reader, where their proclivities lie, where their strengths are, and then having a better sense of their own shortcomings, their own weaknesses, so that they know what direction to work in. You came here for some concrete ideas about, so how can we help kids build stamina? And the first thing I want to say, though, is that you build stamina as a reader by reading. And a first issue that really helps is to set reading goals. Mike Schmoker's work on results, many of you know it, just keeping track of your own progress. It's true in sports, it's true in exercise, it's true in dieting, it's true in all kinds of areas of human endeavor. And so to invite students to think about their own reading goals. We get caught up as teachers, I think sometimes in terms of like how many pages do we assign, and we want, again, students to set their own goals while at the same time being able to carry on, a curriculum and teach a longer work. Most students don't have any idea how long it's going to take them to read the 20 pages you assign. And so one thing I've done with students is to invite them to time their own reading. So here's how we do it. First of all, I put a big sign on the door: do not disturb, experimental process. Everybody needs to put their phones away, no interruptions, because I want them to read for 20 minutes as fast as possible. Someone will raise their hand and say, Mrs. Jago, do you mean without understanding? No, I do not mean without understanding, but push yourself a little bit, 20 pages at full speed. Stop, record how many pages you've read. Now multiply it by 3, and that tells you how many pages you would read in an hour. Divide by 60. Oh, they'll take out their graphing calculators to do this. And that tells you how many words per minute you read, pages per minute you read. In an ideal world, and again, with a book that you're reading for pleasure, you're in the middle of it, you're not in the opening pages when you're still struggling, you kind of want to be reading a page a minute. Very few students do. And the other thing that becomes very obvious at this moment is students say, well, that's not fair. It's going to take her 20 minutes to do the homework. It's going to take me an hour. And you say, well, at least you know. At least you know what it is. The other thing that I want to say about this idea of setting goals as a reader is for us to really do some rethinking about how we parse out a reading assignment. The opening of a book is really hard for everyone. You don't know who's doing what to whom. You don't know the setting. You're getting used to the author's voice in your head. But honestly, think about yourself. Have you ever taken 6 weeks to finish one book that you were reading on your own? We are beating books to death. And so I believe that you want, as a long work, as a full-length work progresses in a unit, you want to be assigning more pages over as you're getting toward the end. Too often, what brought this home to me was that I was adding days on to the unit for the 5 kids who weren't going to read it anyway. Better just to let go. Let go. And I will also, true confessions here, there are times when it's really not working for anybody. This work I've decided and invested in. Well, here's what you can do. Assign the rest of the book over the weekend on Monday, knowing nobody really did it, but say, students, instead of giving an assessment on this, I would just like you to write for 10 minutes about what it is that you think you will take away from our reading of this book. And then you know what? Collect the books, move on to something else that can work. There is no one book that is individually so important. Not Romeo and Juliet, not Julius Caesar, not Hamlet, not there. There's no one book without which you cannot go on to the next for the rest of your life. Much more important is not to beat things to death. The other thing that I think we really need to focus on is to help students know when to skim and when to slow down. Right now, all our students' default reading is that thumb roll they use on their phone. And they're skimming and scanning. Now, that thumb roll is an efficient and effective way to read an Instagram feed. It is a terrible way to read a complex argument, an article from that is 10 pages long. But at the same time, I don't want to diminish the importance of skimming. You're not going to get through college if you don't know how to do some skimming. And every one of us do this every day. However you take in your news, whether it's online, you read a news story and the breaking news is up front in the first couple paragraphs. And then after that, it is the backstory or details. Who among us reads every single word in a typical news story? And so, but I think there are so many students who think that would be cheating. And so we need to help students that figure out how to navigate text efficiently. The other just critical thing is when comprehension breaks down, many of students just quit. This is too hard for me. What if instead we say, when comprehension breaks down, you need to reread, take a look again. Actually, rereading is the most effective reading strategy. It's the one you and I use every day of our life when comprehension breaks down. But you know what? It doesn't have a cool graphic organizer or an acronym, KWL, BYOB. And so we forget that reading to punctuation and rereading, looking back, wait, that didn't make sense. How many times have you done that as you read? And then finally, don't mistake an aversion, a student's aversion for a particular book, necessarily with a hatred for reading. It is easy to do, to think that this is, and I want to teach students that too. Okay, I get it. You didn't like this book. Let's try something else. You don't need to stick with it. And I've purposely chosen as the illustration on these pages, this amazing book, Alan Gratz's latest book, Heroes, because it it does so many things at once. It teaches, it's historical fiction set in on the day that Pearl Harbor was bombed. And let me just, it's a 1-minute video. Let's.
The closest I'd ever come to being a hero were the comic books I made with my best friend Stanley. We lived on a military base in Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. Sure, there was a war going on in the rest of the world, but that was a long way off. Or so we thought. Then Imperial Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and everything changed. Forever. Somehow, Stanley and I ended up on the USS Utah. Being in the middle of a battle isn't exciting like it seems in the comics. It's terrifying. That was the day we learned what it truly means to be a hero.
This book does so many things right. It teaches a whole lot of history and the facts of what happened that day. There's so much action, it's almost exhausting. But also, if you notice these two boys, the boys in the story are a little older than those two actors kind of represented. Were friends who made comic books together. And one of them is Japanese American. His mother is Japanese American. Both of their fathers are in the Navy, are fighter pilots. And what it also explores is how after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Stanley was treated so much differently because he was Japanese American. It does everything. And then you're not going to believe this. Talk about wonderful. The last 14 pages of the book are the graphic novel that one of the boys created with the hero being of Asian descent. It's just like it does. I don't know how Alan Gratz does it. I'm sure you know his books, his other books, Refugee, but he's done it again, I promise. And this and this brings me to the point that we need to help students see that a book is a bicycle, that readers have to pedal, that you need to do, it's not going to do it for you. But at the same time, that effort is decreased as students' skill increases. As you develop that fluency for reading, it's not as hard anymore. And that's what those children who in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade become avid readers. They have a bigger vocabulary, more background knowledge, and not because they've been taking notes or keeping flashcards, but simply they're just building those muscles that are going to make them a really strong reader their whole life long. I worry that, as we focus so attentively on what students should know and be able to do, that mantra from the standards movement, which I completely support, but we don't want to lose sight as we work towards standards of what we want students to be, readers and writers, young people who actually choose to perform these very literate acts. So I want to talk about a couple books because I love. You know Daska Slater from her book, the 57 Bus. This, her latest book, Accountable, which won all kinds of awards. It won the YALSA Award for Excellence in Nonfiction. It's a true story of a racist social media account that changed the life of everybody it touched, and raises this. So it's a group of boys, teenagers, 15, 16 years old, in California, in Northern California, who put out an Instagram account, a private Instagram account, making fun of somebody in their classes, a Black girl in their class. And these boys, I'm not making excuses for them, but they thought they were funny. And it was not funny, it was racist. And the girls who were in talked about and memes were created with were very, very upset, hurt. And it started like this. Within days it was like this, and in weeks the school, the town, the parents became involved. There was no one that wasn't in the long run hurt by what had happened. And it raises this question of what does it mean to be held accountable for harm that takes place behind a screen? It's a really, really terrific book. Another piece of historical fiction, Jacqueline Woodson, the reason she didn't win any awards at the Youth Media Awards is she's already won every award that could be given. And this is, I would say, for middle school students, a book set in the late 70s and 80s in Bushwick, in New York, a neighborhood that Jacqueline Woodson, who herself grew up in. And it's a story of a girl in this community where the apartments are burning down. Now, as it turns out, it's landlords setting places on fire in partly. And so her struggle is what to hold on to, what to save, how to leave, and what do you remember from it. It's just it. Jacqueline Woodson has also done something here that I think is really provides affordances for struggling readers, which is the chapters are really, really short, and it allows breathing space. Students aren't just overwhelmed by really long pieces. Another new, very just recent book that combines fact and fiction. This is Candace Fleming's The Enigma Girls. It is based on true stories, but she includes dialogue, which obviously, again, let me let Candace tell you just a little bit about it.
Hi, I'm Candace Fleming, and I'm thrilled to introduce my new book, The Enigma Girls: How 10 Teenagers Broke Ciphers, Kept Secrets, and Helped Win World War II. In the records of Bletchley Park, Britain's former top-secret code-breaking facility, I came across this small moment. In 1941, 17-year-old Sarah Norton received a mysterious letter telling her to report to Station X in 4 days' time. That was all it said. What was Station X? Sarah wondered. And what would she be doing there? More importantly, at least to the teenaged girl, what should she pack? She finally settled on 5 daytime outfits, lipstick, her record player, and most importantly, her teddy bear. The moment forced me to take a fresh look at Bletchley's history, to delve beneath the accepted version of events to uncover a different story, a story about thousands of young women between the ages of 14 and 18 who made up the bulk of Bletchley Park's workforce. Teenagers, most of their stories, their toils, sacrifice, and yes, youthful goofiness have been for the most part forgotten until now.
I love books that do this and
Hi,
oh, I'm
I'm
sorry.
Candace Fleming, and I'm thrilled to introduce my
That take history and teach it to students with all the tools of a great storyteller. Now, this book by Pedro Martin won all kinds of awards from in the last iteration of the Youth Media Awards. It's a graphic memoir of his own life, and he was a kid growing up in a family of 9 children. The older 4 were born in Mexico, the younger 5 born in the States. And as the story opens, they're all getting in this Winnebago caravan. Well, the older kids are in a pickup truck traveling behind, to travel down to Mexico to pick up their grandfather to bring him back to them. The parents are pickers, are farm workers. It is hilarious. It is all told from the point of view of this the boy. And I think it's a kind of book that you would find, well, you better buy a couple copies because it's going to get lost, because the kid's going to read it and just pass it on. But what I want to say is, I don't know that I've ever seen a book like this that in which there are no cultural cliches. It's out there, it's funny, it's just terrific. Help Wanted by Adele Waldman is fiction, and it's a story of a group of people, and the tale is told through several voices, all of whom are working at a big box store, unloading things and then stocking them in the store. And it's a story of people who are living on the edge, working an hourly wage, never quite being able to get enough hours. And it's an important story. It's nickel and dime for our times. Adele Waldman herself went and, like Barbara Ehrenreich, and worked in a store like this to tell a story. And again, it's not heavy at all. It's even lighthearted, but at the same time exploring what I think are really important issues for all of us. You know, Tommy Orange has a new book. So those of you who knew, they're there. Wandering Stars is almost 2 books in one. It takes the same people, the individuals that you remember from there. And if you remember how it ended, the young man has just been shot at an Oakland powwow. And it goes back in history and tells the story of his ancestors, and it deals with the reservation schools and all of the things that have happened over many, many years, and then goes forward to say what happened to that boy who was shot. And it becomes a story about addiction first from pain medications, but told with sympathy, but also with heartbreak. Tommy Orange, he's talked about this in interviews about the book, is talking partly from his own experience, but certainly from his family's experience. And then one more book. Oh my gosh, please, you need to read this book. It will, I predict it will win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. Percival Everett has taken Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn and retold it through the point of view of Jim. And most books that do this are terrible. You know, I mean, Jane Eyre is a vampire or something. I hate all that. This is brilliant because it invites readers to see all of those same circumstances told from a different vantage point. And it is beautifully written. As I said, I know a lot of schools have stopped teaching Huckleberry Finn for reasons of language issues. What if we taught James first? Not either or, and then read Twain. I think it's just a moment that it could really, really work. Now, there's something that Lori Campbell put in the chat about, it seems that the kids, well, what they want to do, the only books they want to read are these really banned books and disturbing books. Gay Ivey and Peter Johnson have done some incredible research. They started off with 8th grade students who weren't reading anything. And so their teachers gave them lots of choice, many of the books that all over the country are being banned, and gave kids time to read and time to talk about what they were reading. And then they followed those students through high school, conducted thousands of interviews. And what was really interesting is that the students not only became better readers, but they themselves felt that they were becoming better people, that they understood more about their own emotions, about other people's, like the walking in someone else's shoes. They also, when they were asked about, but you're reading about kids doing some really terrible things, and they actually looked at the interviewers as though they had two heads and said, we don't use it as a guide for what we should do. Instead, these are cautionary tales. So I'll close with this, to me, one of my favorite quotations from Franz Kafka. We need books that affect us like disaster, that grieve us deeply like the death of someone we loved more than ourselves, like being banished into forests far from everyone. A book must be an axe for the frozen sea within us. Thank you all so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sticking with this. And I wish you all the best. Oops.